Hello, mentors. I'm Luyanda Hadebe, the new 910s coordinator. As we're about to get into summarizing, let's first have a discussion on study skills. So, in this session, we'll focus on different study skills. In the 910s handbook, this handbook, on pages 59 to 60, you'll find study hints. Those are different study tips for different times of the academic year. Please share those with your mentees. However, you're also allowed to share some tips that aren't in there with your mentee to help them study a bit better. To begin the study skills session, we'll start off by doing an activity. On the 910s course page on Are You Connected, there's a forum discussion. This forum discussion can be used by mentors to discuss any matters relating to the 910s program. But for this particular activity, we need the mentors to share with everyone how they study. You can tell us what has worked for you, and you can acknowledge your own abilities on what has worked for you in your studying. This is to learn from each other, and maybe you can get tips on how you can better your own study method. Now that we've completed our activity, we'll move on to studying versus learning. There's a very familiar phrase that's up there that I'm afraid a lot of mentors have at least said once or twice in their academic journey. It goes, I studied, but I didn't learn anything. Now, mentors, let's be honest with ourselves. How many of us can actually relate to that? I know I can relate so much to this, and I'm guilty of studying very hard, but not learning or understanding anything that I have just studied. Now, mentors, that is not what we want for our mentees. We want our mentees to study to learn. To learn is to gain knowledge or skill by studying, practicing, being taught, or experiencing something. It is active participation in the learning process. To study is to read, memorize facts, attend school in order to learn about a subject. So it is deliberate learning in order to have what you've learned in your memory. Now we're on learning styles. Learning styles are how we learn. We are all different, so we all have our own different ways of learning. It is always advisable for people to find out which learning style is best suitable for them or for the subjects that they're doing, and for them to stick to that learning style because it may help them excel in their academics. We encourage mentors to help mentees find out which learning style is best suitable for them. Now let's look at the different learning styles. There's a visual learner who learns best by seeing their study material, so by looking at their graphs, pictures, or mind maps. Then there's an auditory learner who learns best by listening in on the study material, so by listening in a lecture or listening to a podcast. There's a verbal learner who prefers talking about what they've learned or teaching it to somebody else. There's a physical learner, which I think most drama students can relate to, where you act out on what you have learned. Now, we also have different environments that suit us. Other learners are most comfortable in studying alone in a very quiet place, and other learners are most comfortable being around other people, so studying in groups. So you just need to find out which study environment is best suitable for you. Now that we have learned the different learning styles, we can go on to memory. So those learning styles need to help us to remember what we have studied and for what we have studied to be kept in our memory for a long term. So when we are studying using our learning style, the information comes into the sensory memory and it stays there. But if it is not rehearsed or gone through again, it gets forgotten. But if you rehearse it or go through it all the time, it goes on to the working memory. So in the working memory again, it needs to be rehearsed, needs to be studied again using that learning style that you have chosen, gone through again, or if not gone through again, it will also be forgotten. So in order for it to be on the long-term memory, it needs to be done over and over again so that you can remember what you have studied. You need to go through it over and over again. Now we're looking at how we can be effective about the learning. Effective learning has 3 elements to it, which are methods, content application, and well-being. These three elements are really important in ensuring that effective learning takes place. But for that effective learning to take place, these elements have to be well done. Now let's have a closer look at each element, starting with methods. Under methods, we have different study techniques that could be used by learners. They could either do mind maps, flowcharts, flashcards, or bullet summaries, or they can even use all of them for their different subjects. We'll have another look at these methods later on in this session. Let's move on to content or application. Concentration during sessions. So a learner needs to know how long their concentration span lasts, so that when they are writing out their timetable, they're able to write down that they will study for 45 minutes if the concentration span is 45 minutes, or 60 minutes if it's 60 minutes, and then take a study break, and then come back again and study for those minutes they're able to concentrate at. Because if a learner studies above their concentration span, they won't be able to commit to memory or retain any memory after that. So it's really important for learners to study for the amount that they're able to concentrate at. Exam taking skills will also be looked at later on in this session. Well-being. Nutrition. So we always hear people saying that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. So having a good balanced meal is important so that you're able to concentrate and study. Balance. I think this is the most important thing. A learner needs to have balance. So when writing out the timetable, the learner needs to have balance on that timetable. They need to have time for school, of course, during the day, studying after school, so doing homework and also studying. Then they also need to have time to spend time with their loved ones. Then they can also have time for sports or societies if they are involved in those. So there needs to be a balance. Life is not about academics only. There is also meant to be time to relax and enjoy life. But academics is the most important part of their lifestyle at the moment. Study space. So the study space needs to be clean and it needs to be very conducive to studying. And it can be comfortable, but not comfortable enough for the learner to be able to sleep. So there needs to be a desk and a chair and good lighting for them to be able to study properly. Time management skills. The learner needs to be able to manage their time. If they're able to stick to the timetable that is drawn, which should be balanced, then they'll be able to manage their time really well and not have any shortfalls or submitting their assignments late. And my favorite one, sleep. A learner needs to ensure that they have enough sleep every day. They cannot be sleeping for short hours because then that will disturb their concentration or their studying, or it will move on and disturb everything else that's in their timetable. So sleep is really important because you just get to rest and just do nothing, and your brain gets to relax as well. Methods is one of the elements of effective learning. Under methods were mind maps. Learners can use mind maps as a form of summarizing. So the learner can write down the topic that they'd like to do, then branch it out with summary points as shown on the picture. Another example which was under methods was flowcharts. Flowcharts can also be used as a form of summarizing. When looking at the presentation, you can see the different types of flowcharts. So a learner can either color coordinate their flowcharts or they can use different shapes for their flowcharts. It's always easier to use a flowchart if it is a process that you'd like to summarize because one point leads on to the next and it goes on to the next. Under methods, there were also flashcards. Flashcards are also another form of summarizing. They're most probably the shortest form of summarizing because they're short, simple, and straight to the point. In order to have useful flashcards, you need to be able to break down content into units. Stick to what is relevant, and what is not relevant, do not write on your flashcards because it makes the flashcards lengthy. Also on your flashcards, you could maybe pose questions that you'll remember the answers to. So flashcards are meant to be short and simple, as I said earlier. I have only been able to go over a few methods with you, However, there are many other methods that are available that can be used as a form of summarizing. You can even use the ones that have been listed on the presentation, or you can go and research to see which other methods will be suitable for your mentees, or even for yourself, because we're all studying, so these methods could be useful to you too, not just the mentees. Now we're having a closer look at exam taking skills under content or application. These exam taking skills can also be found in the 910 handbook on Are You Connected? These exam taking skills are tips that can be shared with your mentees before exam season so that your mentees can be well prepared for that exam time and use some of these tips that have been listed here. Now let's go through them. Be on time for your exam. Rather be 30 minutes early than being late, because when you're late, you then have a shorter time to complete your exam. Also advise your mentees to not cram their work, but rather to use the different methods that we have gone through in this session to prepare for their exams and not cram the previous night. Make sure you have everything necessary. So make sure you have all the stationery that you will need. If you are going to write maths, ensure that you have a calculator. Make sure you have everything, because during an exam, you're not allowed to borrow anything. You need to have all your things there. Don't talk about the exam with other students on the day of the exam. This goes for before the exam and after the exam. Before the exam, it will just confuse you, and after the exam, it will just make you think about things that you can no longer change. Read the whole paper. So during the time given to read the paper, go through the whole paper and make sure that you understand each question. Don't leave any questions unanswered. Try to attempt at least some of the questions that you may think you understand. You can also gain marks from that by just attempting them. Lastly, answer questions you're comfortable with first, because it's easier to get marks when you answer questions you're comfortable with and also when you have time, and then leave the questions that you're not comfortable with for the end. I personally think that well-being is one of the most important elements for effective learning, because when your well-being is not good, then you aren't able to learn effectively or even just partake in anything, because your main focus would be on improving your well-being. So well-being is really important. It helps you do everything else. So let's look at how well-being can be taken care of. Nutrition, having a well-balanced meal, having a food from each of the food groups and having it balanced. And also you can check out which food is best for studying. I think it's fish if I'm not mistaken. And also balance. I don't know how much I need to reiterate how important balance is. They need to have time for academics and also have time for their family and friends, and also just have time for themselves. So they need to have a really well balanced timetable so that they're able to balance everything. The study space. The study space needs to be quiet and so that the learner can be able to focus and have no disturbances at all. Last but not least, time management. This is definitely a skill that takes a while to master, but you can definitely master it with time. So we're all given 24 hours to do whatever we need to do for the day. So it's always advisable to plan your time beforehand. So you can either plan it a day before for the day, or a week before for the week, or a month in advance for the following month. It's up to you how you plan it, but you need to have it planned so that you're able to master the skill of time. So if you know that you have hockey practice every Thursday for 2 hours, you need to write that on your timetable so that you know on Thursdays you have 2 hours off, of which you are just playing hockey. So you need to have time for everything, but within your 24 hours, it needs to be well balanced. You can't only focus on one thing throughout the whole day. It needs to be different things. I hope you have learned a lot from the study skills session, and if you have any other questions, use the forum discussion or you can email me.